Welcome back to the Data Driven Real Estate Podcast, the podcast for real estate professionals dedicated to driving business using data. I'm Aaron Norris with Sean O'Toole with PropertyRadar, and this week on episode 32, we have Kristi Cirtwill. She's a real estate investor based out of Southern California who's been flipping houses since 2007. She specializes in hoarder houses and the accessory dwelling unit. Hey, when it gets hard to find deals, you learn how to create them, and that's just what she's done. She was an early adopter in accessory dwelling units, so we talk about horror stories, things you need to know about ADUs, and why they're having their moment here in California and in other states as well. So you will not want to miss the show this week. Kristi, welcome to the show. Thank you for being here. First question out of the gate, what keeps you so excited about real estate here in California?
I just think the appreciation is just too great to pass up. If I'd realized when you can buy a property and 30 years later, it's just an insane amount. Whereas if you're buying in the Midwest, which is fine too, it's just a different strategy, it just doesn't appreciate the same. So I still really like that about California. I like the weather. Not so much government policies right now, but we'll stay focused on the positive. But yeah, no, I'm here for good. And the ADUs, obviously, we'll talk about today if they come up, have really added good cash flow to my property. So.
Yeah, and you've been such a tremendous resource for me as you and I have been tackling the ADU space for years. I've been working with regulators and some of the senators that have been writing it, trying to give them some nuance and some feedback. I've been even working with cities, trying to get them excited about ADUs, but you were one of the first investors I knew that went all in on ADUs. So ADUs come up. Why did you get excited?
Well, maybe I was a bit dumb being the first one jumping in and making all the mistakes and paying higher fees, but I just got excited about them back I actually think they came into play 2017. Mm-hmm. But I didn't find out about them until 2018. And honestly, I couldn't believe it. I thought, how can you have an R1 zone property, single family, and put a second unit on it? And that's what these are. They're not just little tiny houses or something on wheels, which you can also do, but these are, and they allow up to 1,200 square feet of a second house now. And if you live on the property, you can have it, I call it a JADU for short, a junior ADU, where you have to live in either the junior, the ADU, or the main house. So you can actually make 3 units out of a zoned R1 property. So when I heard that, when JADUs just came out, I think last year, but in 2018, I was flipping a bunch of houses and realizing these could actually make sense to keep as rentals, because to keep a single family house in a decent area, in a decent neighborhood, is really hard to make cash flow off of that, unless you have 50% down, or you pay all cash or whatever. So I thought, okay, if I can get a loan and build an ADU, then I can have a second unit, and now it sort of makes sense. So.
And you've been building these in several markets as well, so you have a lot of experience. The 2017 ADU law, how do I describe? The cities weren't exactly excited about it. I know several people in planning, and they were actually really upset because the state had forced them to stop playing games, and they got rid of rules around owner occupied, having to have the property have at least one of the units be owner occupied. They've done all kinds of things to squash the NIMBYism. So it was just interesting to see, even up to last year, with the HOAs not being able to include JADUs as part of their calculations for the percentage of non-rental.
I'm gonna call it timeout, because we're like ADUs, JADUs, we've got a wide audience, right? What is an ADU?
Sorry, I'm using all these acronyms. Yes, I should explain that.
Fair enough.
Accessory Dwelling Unit.
Right. Okay.
JADU, Junior Accessory Dwelling Unit. It's
you mentioned R1. So that's a single family home. It's zoned to only be one for one home, one family, one living unit, right? Is what these properties were zoned for, what, they were designed for. And now, because of the shortage in housing, affordable housing crisis, the state has come in and said, hey, you can put on a second unit on these single family zoned properties. And they're calling those accessory dwelling units. Is that a good summary? Okay.
That's a great summary. Yeah.
And the junior accessory dwelling unit now allows you to do another one on top of that. And dive into a little bit more on the difference between the ADU and the junior ADU. Are there different size requirements? Tell us a little bit more. Where are is that now statewide? Is that everywhere? Where's JDU stand?
Well, the ADUs can be, I believe, up to 1,200 square feet now, and they can be attached. Like you can, put something attached to the main house. You can do it detached. Those were the ones I mostly did: detached, freestanding, stick built. You can convert an existing space. So all the above, and
like
it can be
garage, convert the garage into another unit.
Yeah. So that's all ADU option. Okay. JADU option, you have to convert existing space. You can't build something from scratch. It has to be like, an example would be like a master bedroom and bathroom in the back of your house. You could just put a door separate so that unit could be accessed separately, put a little kitchenette in there, and now you've got like a studio-sized JADU. JADUs have to be 500 square feet or less. You can also convert an attached garage, and that could be a JADU.
Like a 20 by 20 garage, 400 square feet, convert it, add a bathroom and a little kitchenette. And people have been doing that for years, just it hasn't really been legal. And so,
well, and the funny thing is back in the day, I was buying houses to flip in Long Beach, and there's this inspection you have to have with each sale, and they inspect the garage. Well, if there's anything going on in there, you had to rip it all out. And now it's like you can put it all back in and legalize it. It's just insane.
I ran into something, it was a little different, but similar. I was buying foreclosures up and down the state in the 2002, 2005 timeframe. And in Fresno, there was these houses that I would get at what seemed like a great deal. And you go into these houses and they were like, like a maze. It was just, they were crazy how there's just walls and stuff everywhere. Well, what happened is somebody figured out that the Section 8 housing rules, right? They require the bedroom to be a certain size, the closet to be a certain size, but you get rent based on the number of bedrooms, not on whether it's a good floor plan or not. So people would like turn the living rooms into like 2 additional bedrooms. It was just like, and these houses just became like these Habitrail, mouse mazes. It's crazy. And they were a lot of work to fix up. And I realized why I was the only one that bought them.
Well, and that's a good point. And one of the things, even with my consideration to build more ADUs, don't just slap these things up. Don't just carve out a piece of your house and make it a junior, like put some thought into it, because the neighborhoods I'm doing it in are nicer ones. And I don't want to be, that guy who is just making a mess of the neighborhood. So it does have to have some thought put into it, I think.
Go ahead, Aaron.
I call it being a cramlord. It's cramming all the square footage, ruining the quality of life, and possibly the value of not just the rents, but the property if you do it wrong.
Right. And sometimes a garage, like a garage could be worth more as a garage. Don't just convert it because it's there, but if it's appropriate to do so, do it. I mean, the cash flow is great off of these units.
Garage is the most important room in the house to me.
Sean has quite the garage. He's got the best garage.
So, you touched on that, the quality of the neighborhood, et cetera, right? When all the other people in this neighborhood bought in this neighborhood, they bought into a single family neighborhood. That's what it was zoned. I mean, let's just talk about that. I mean, how do you feel about, there's an opportunity here for you as a landlord, right? And But is this really the right thing to be doing? I mean, affordable housing is clearly a problem, but geez, having 3 family units with a ADU and a JDU next door when you bought into a single family residence and all the cars and the rest, is that really the right thing to be doing here?
Well, like I say, it's got to be neighborhood appropriate. There's just some neighborhoods it doesn't make sense. But, some of the things, and we've talked about this, Aaron, is what makes a good property to add an ADU. Okay, well, you don't want to just like start throwing things on there, but if there's a back alley access where, there's a place to carve out a parking spot next to the ADU, then is that even impacting the neighborhood negatively in any way? I don't think so. So, and it's providing housing for somebody. And I think that's why these are getting rented up so fast, is they're smaller units, they're brand new. It's not like a condo where you have shared walls. These are, well, mine anyway, are mostly detached, so they're just a separate building. So to me, it's one solution to the affordable housing crisis. So
is there off-street parking requirements, like that, you're going to add another ADU or a JDU? Do you have to add like another off-street parking area?
I don't think there's any restriction on parking at all these days. I mean, you're supposed to be within half a mile of transit or whatever, but I mean, that's never even come up as an issue with any of the cities I've worked with.
Cool. Okay.
Yeah. And the thought behind it was the affordable housing issue. This was a very creative way the state really forced the hands of the cities, because some of the bills like SB 50 here in California, where medium density was supposed to be put along transportation corridors, by the time it landed at the local level, council members were getting complaints from the NIMBYs and it would get squashed. And you're like, well, how do we do this then? So it leverages existing infrastructure. I thought it was one of the most powerful things that they've ever done. And then they've systematically, whatever the cities came out with trying to stop them, the state has come on top, said, stop playing games. Then you have other cities like San Diego. I hear they're in discussion to allow up to 8 units on R1 lots that are large enough. And you're like, what?
Whoa.
Yeah, I don't know if that's gone through, but I've been watching several different cities do very creative things. Even tiny homes. Tiny homes do not fall under, those aren't stick built. Those are, are under DMV rules. So, but some of them are now allowing them as part of their ADU regulation. So you really have to check at the local level.
Well, and the cool thing is there's some creative, thoughtful designs out there. It's not like mine where I just was so excited I just built a stucco box, which are still really nice, but there's some cool designs going up and it's attractive. So it's not taking away from the neighborhoods, in my opinion, out of all the ones I've seen.
Walk us through your journey. You were one of the first to get out there, really start doing this. And, and I mean, even yesterday I saw you posting about, cool furniture to make these places more usable. So walk us through your journey, where it started and kind of where it is now.
Well, gosh, do you want the hoarder home bit too thrown in there, or just the ADU bit?
Throw in the hoarder home.
Well, I moved. I'm so naive. I just upped and moved one day to California and I landed up in Long Beach, and that was right in 2007. So I didn't know any better. I didn't know about the ups and downs of California. I just showed up. By the time I got my immigration stuff figured out, by 2008, I turned around and the same house I was looking at the year before was 40% off. I'm like, how does this happen? How does this 600,000 house go down to like 350? And so that was the start of my career. So the timing worked out perfectly, actually, because I could start buying these houses on sale. So I started flipping, and then a lot of the homes initially came off the MLS because they were REOs or short sales, that sort of thing. And it sort of turned into more of a referral-based business for me. Come 2014 or so, I started buying everything based off referral. So that's when I sort of fell into the hoarder home niche. Just had a knack with working with it's a really interesting and sensitive subject. And I think when you can go and still respect people and know that they know they have gotten themselves in a bit of a situation and they need help, then that sort of became the niche there. So I'm still a flipper at heart, but over time I realized, oh, I've got to hold some of these. And I had a bunch of rentals that just were way too high maintenance. They were condos in Long Beach mostly, and just too much work. Like, you shouldn't have to work so hard for passive cash flow, even after you have a management company helping you. So got rid of those. And that's when I started really kind of doing the Mike Cantu method, where, start buying better assets in better neighborhoods with better tenants. And I thought, well, how am I ever going to do that when it just doesn't really make sense for cash flow? And that's when the ADUs I heard about that, and I thought, oh, okay, now this sort of makes sense. Because what you don't get off in the main house, you make up for with the ADU. So that's been the journey over the last dozen years or so.
Got it. And so your first ADU was in, you said 2018?
Yeah, well, I learned about it, and I had a batch of houses that I was going to flip, and I thought, wait a minute, if I keep all these and build ADUs, then these work. So yeah. I built 6, right out of the gate, all in different cities, learning the different rules, and halfway through finding out I was supposed to be living in, because back then they had a covenant you had to notarize and record to say you were going to live in either the main house or the ADU. Well, I couldn't live in 5 different places at once. So I had that challenge to overcome. And now apparently you can get that covenant removed. So I'm looking into that. My friends already looked into that as well.
You're not living in 5 houses anymore, or you're getting out of that.
Am I buying more houses?
No. The 5 you already had, you're not having to live in all 5 of them.
No. Well, technically, I suppose I could. One day a week I bounce around, but that's not very convenient. So, yeah. So I did 5 I kept as rentals. 1 I built to flip. I didn't have any appraisal problems with that one because it was actually built on an R2 zone property. And I have 3 more in the works. I'm actually doing my first JADU. So I will convert a garage, but it is appropriate to do so into a junior ADU. So I'm doing that as well. So
interesting. Can you share a little bit about cost?
Sure.
What do these look like?
Yeah, so I think the costs have come way down. So in 2000, so I built this, the 6 I built, I started in 2018 and I finished it, I think, early 2019. So the cost back then on average, the soft cost, so basically the design, the architect, the structural, the submitting the plans at the planning department, and permits. So all the stuff before you put the shovel in the ground, on average, I was paying about $20,000 per city. So I think on the low end, 18,000 up to 25,000. So in that range, and that was just for, those soft costs. The construction, I was getting at the time 180 square foot is what I was paying. So now I'm sure that would be more. Everything's gone up. Lumber has gone up. Minimum wage, they're talking about raising that. And it's not just minimum wage. It's like now the skilled guys who are making 18 an hour, they want to be bumped up too. So just everything ends up going up. So it will be more now, but basically that's what I was building them for. So the construction was 180.
And how big of units are you building?
On the low end, like a studio size, like 440 square feet. And then I've done a couple 1 bedrooms and 2 bedrooms. I think the largest being 755. That was a 2 bedroom.
So At 500 square feet, that's 90 grand plus 20 grand in soft costs, 110 grand. And what do you get for rent for the ADU?
So
Average.
the one bedrooms, I'm getting 1,800.
Okay.
The two bedroom, well, actually I have that property sublease, so I have somebody paying rent for the whole property. So I actually don't know what he's getting for that ADU, but I mean 1,800 easily, and that would be for the smaller one bedrooms. So I've got a 500 square foot one bedroom in North Orange County. That's 1,800. So it's, and it costs 130 to build or something.
Yeah.
It makes sense. It meets that sort of 1% rule or whatever.
Yeah.
You go by.
Right. So 1,800 times 12, 18,000 plus 36, 22,000 roughly a year. You're increasing your property taxes by $1,000. You increase maybe probably have the folks pay their own utilities. So yeah, I mean, that's a pretty good return on investment. Really good.
Yeah, it's decent. And one of the things I like about anything that's new is you don't really have any problems with it for, you shouldn't have any problems for at least 10 years or so, because everything's new. The roof, the heating, the air conditioning, you might have some maintenance here and there, but
Am I doing that math right? Is 20 grand in new income for 100, 110? Like that's almost a 20% return, right?
Oh,
like
you can literally, if a homeowner's build these in their backyard, they will pay for themselves in 3 to 6 years.
wow.
I've met with homeowners to show, even if you borrow the money and you take the rent from that and pay it all towards just paying off that loan, you can have these paid off in 3 to 6 years.
This is where we're seeing the rise of companies, and I can't remember the name of it, but I saw a company out there that's saying like, we'll build an ADU in your backyard, right? And we'll split the rents with you. And it's still a pretty amazing return.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I wouldn't do that personally, but yes, I've heard of that being done. I am working with a company, ADU Resource Center, and they're helping homeowners like get started because people generally just don't even know where to start. And to me, it's, you figure it out, but some people it's overwhelming, especially now you can't even go into the cities. You have to try to figure out who to contact online and all this stuff. So
I got to say, as a homeowner, like the idea of having somebody living in my backyard, like doesn't have a lot of appeal. Right. But for the landlord, right, where, okay, maybe they get a little less rent for the house in the front because they've put a house in the back, it's probably not meaningful less rent. And it's a huge change in their return on investment.
Yeah. And people are doing it for different reasons. People are actually building, I mean, they used to be called granny suites for a reason. You've got another place that you can build and house family members. So some people are doing that. Instead of putting their parents in a assisted living home, they've got them right in the backyard, so that's something that homeowners are doing. Yeah, I get it. There's been some resistance with families with kids who they just don't want a tenant in their backyard. But, if you're single or a couple or whatever, and you don't mind, having one of these things, you can create separate pathways to them, separate backyards. So it's very private.
Right.
In some cases. Right.
When they're designed well, like on corner lots, I mean, it could be a very different living existence. I'll link a video I created on ADUs because we kept getting this question. I sort of share the 3 ways to find ADUs. And one of those is that very hyper local expert that knows a specific neighborhood and understands an alleyway in the back basically means you have 2 separate units with a fence in the back and they're living different existences. It's great.
There's different styles of houses that work better. And that's a great point, Aaron, because I'm about to market to one neighborhood in particular where I just like the style of the house. Mm-hmm. The house is almost set off to the side and it's connected by a breezeway to the garage. So in behind that garage, you've got a wide open space to create a detached ADU with a separate backyard for it. And you don't even know, there's no impact at all. You just walk down the middle and you either go to the left or the right, and you don't even see the guy next door. It's just like having a neighbor.
Have you gotten much feedback from tenants as far as anybody saying anything, or you bought the flip and added the ADU before either tenant moved in?
I did all the above. So on one property, I did have a tenant in place, but he happened to be my property manager. So I said, okay, I'm going to build an ADU and I'm going to
another management unit.
and I said, you can rent it. This is how much I want. And I knew he'd get substantially more. So he was making money off it too, but it got me to allow me to build it. But I knew he was going to move anyway, eventually. So he ended up buying his own house. And now he just rents both of those units separately. And there's no problem with either tenant. They just know that's what they're getting into when they rent it. Two other ones, I actually rent both the house and the ADU just to one tenant. So they rent both. So they rent out one themselves, they sublet it, or they have other family members and they just all pay the rent together.
Interesting.
So, especially going into the JDUs, I saw you had a Facebook post, I think it was just yesterday or the day before, where you're like looking at Murphy beds and stuff like that. So, talk to us about like, what do you think the best practices are, like in terms of like maximizing these smaller spaces and making them cool? Do you do them furnished, like with that Murphy bed and stuff, or unfurnished? Like where's that at, and where do you think the future is?
I do both. So some I've rented unfurnished. Couple others I have furnished. I actually converted existing space above a garage that was already permitted as a rumpus room. So I converted that into an ADU, and that one is actually up in Lake Arrowhead. So that one I rent furnished. It's just easier to rent them furnished sometimes. So, and it's not that much. I mean, it costs you the upfront to put in the furniture and pay for that, but it kind of pays for itself. So I think it's case by case. Generally, if you can rent it unfurnished, it's probably better because then you don't need to maintain everything. But some of these smaller spaces, I think it's a draw to have them well thought out, even more so than the bigger spaces, because there's not that much space to work with. So maybe instead of putting in, like, do you really need a dishwasher in a 400 square foot ADU? Like, maybe not. Maybe that space is better used for, something else. So case by case, and you have to just think about who's going to be in that unit, what type of renter, who you're going to be renting it to. So
right.
That sort of thing.
Is everything been stick built so far? Or are you starting to look at prefab or tiny homes or some of those options?
I've looked at a prefab that somebody else did. And I tried to talk to him about the numbers, and it doesn't seem like it's really much cheaper by the time you have to drag this thing in or crane it down or whatever. It could be. I think it's just personal preference. It was really nice, but I think probably with my crew, stick built is better because then you can customize it really the exact way you want it. So to each their own. I don't think there's a benefit either way.
You're doing all stick built so far.
Yes.
Cool.
Early on, the vacation rental ADU got squashed pretty quick. So there's I believe most cities have a 30-day minimum. Do you know anybody doing sort of the furnished rental for traveling nurses at all and really exploding income?
I do know some people who are renting rooms to travel nurses.
Okay.
And that seems to, despite, everything going on with COVID, that still works. In fact, they're probably the most careful tenant out of anybody. So they'll rent rooms. It seems to be what's more affordable. Rooms in North Orange County right now, and even Los Angeles County, are $950 on the low end. That's what rooms are in a nice house are renting for. So, and that's furnished. So I think there's a niche there. If you don't mind a little bit more turnover, every 3 months, renting rooms, it's a niche to get into.
Have you had any problems with things like mail? I love that you have, I'm able to ask this to you because you have different counties. You sent me examples of 3 different counties that you have ADUs in, and each area handles ADUs slightly differently, but mail has always been a big concern. How do you deal with that?
I haven't had any issues. Like, it's weird because most of the cities want you to put up the separate ADU number. So when the city issues whatever that's going to be, sometimes it's, the main house is 1, 2, 3, and then the ADU is 1, 2, 3.5, or 1, 2, 3B, or 1, 2, 3A, or 1, 2, 5. Like, it all depends. It's city by city. So you have to put that address somewhere, and you just sort of figure out where to do it. Sometimes it's on the front of the garage. So you've got the main house on one side and the ADU on the other. So sort of weird. And you're supposed to have 2 mailboxes.
Oh, okay.
So that's just how I've been doing it so far. So
And
it works out.
Because of 911 having 2 designated postal addresses and I guess, addresses in that sense are required. We're not seeing that come through in public records, right? So public records still calls the APN, right? And that APN has one address assigned to it. So these are a little hard to find in public records still at this point. The counties and cities haven't really, come up with a standard approach to that.
Yeah, I guess the biggest issue is when you're trying to get food delivered and, which door do they knock on? They can't really figure it out. That's sort of more of the issue. The mailman sort of figures it out, over time, but the DoorDash guy is still a bit confused. So that's really the only issue.
First world problems. How about utilities? Do you make a habit of forcing the tenants to split? Does that change by city what they require?
Yeah, if I could go back in time, maybe I would have done this a little differently. So City of Bellflower made me put in my own separate water meter, $5,800 later just to install that, plus the digging of the trench and everything else that needed to be done. But in the end, I have 2 separate water bills. So is that going to pay for itself? I suppose over time, it's good. Other cities just send you the utility bill all on one bill. So it's not separated in any way. So for one house, I just pay it as the landlord. I sort of estimated based on previous bills what it was going to be for both units, and with the understanding, or even written into the lease, like, the bill can't go over this or you're going to start paying for it or pay the extra. So that's sort of how I've done it. I've just charged a little bit extra for the utilities, and it's covered that way. But yeah, should I have separated them? Maybe.
You have some pretty hilarious war stories about some of the things that you've run into, and I would love for you to share a few of them.
Oh boy, where do we start?
How difficult is it as a city? So tell us a city war story or county.
Well, I'll tell you a project I'm working on right now, in case there's any listeners who have any contacts in the city of Los Angeles that could help me. I've had a project submitted since November 2018, and I'm still waiting for permits. So this is
the ADU law says they've got 60 days or else it's considered gone through. Why can't you just barrel forward?
Well, and I did contact Greg Nicholas, by the way.
You're welcome.
But he really is only in charge of ADUs, I think. This also is a lot split. So a minimum lot requirement in City of Los Angeles is 5,000 square feet. Well, I bought a property that's 13,000 square feet on a corner lot. So I'm splitting it in 2. It's already zoned R1. So I don't even have to change the zoning, but there's 2 houses on the lot. So somewhere along the way, it was probably zoned, differently, R2 or something, but it got rezoned to R1. So all I want to do is split the lot into two. The houses are already where they should be on the lot, and then renovate the houses and build the ADUs. And I've had plans submitted since November 2018. So in January 2020, the rule came out where if you're going to build an ADU, the cities are supposed to get back to you within 60 days. Okay. Then COVID hit, and that is, that's just a joke now. Just nowhere is anyone getting back to you in 2 months. It's more like 4, maybe 5 months. But because my project has a lot split as well, it's just taking a long time.
It took me 4 months to get a new sign approved on one of my commercial buildings. It was like, what? Like, it should have been over the counter like in a minute, and it took 4 months.
It's really insane. There really isn't a housing problem. It's just more of a red tape, bureaucratic problem. That's what it is. Because, and if I can just get these units on the market, living in one and 3 other units, that's 3 housing units I could be providing to LA residents. And I'm just at this standstill. They just keep passing the buck around to the next guy, and it just goes nowhere. And I'm not sure what I can do about that. So
anybody that's blaming builders, investors, etc., for affordable housing is out of their freaking mind. It is 100% your government officials and yourself for being a NIMBY, right? Like, almost, it's so crazy. All these folks who say, oh, I want affordable housing. We see it here in Tahoe all the time. Everybody's like, the housing's unaffordable. It's not, it's ridiculous. And then somebody proposes a new housing development. They're like, we shouldn't allow any more building up here. This is Tahoe. It's beautiful. And it's like, pick one, right? Like, it's either going to be unaffordable and not very many buildings, or it's going to be affordable and we're going to do a lot of building. Like, it's a choice. You don't get both.
This is really tough because you've got people who just want things left the way it is. On the other hand, here I am, the small developer trying to improve the neighborhood. By the way, the city wants me to add 3 lamp posts or street lights or whatever. Those got to be $5,000 a pop. So that's part of the project. They'll approve it, but I have to do the improvements on the street. Okay, fine, I'll do it.
This is for the lot split?
Yes. So I'm improving that whole corner. It's a corner lot, so I'm improving that whole corner.
I think,
but
maybe a mistake, because like if you I've done a lot of lot splits, right? Where they're like, even where they've said we won't allow a lot split, but they don't have any basis. Like a lot split, if it meets the requirements, you can just do it. It's $1,200 and you're just done. You think if you'd submitted the lot split separately from then the ADUs, like maybe submitting the whole thing as a package is part of the problem? Or
I think so. In hindsight, that's the way the planner told me to do it, or told my architect to do it. And we just went with that. And I didn't think to question that. So yes, next time I'll just split it and then, do the building, because that might have gone faster.
Have you reached out to the city council member yet? And
okay, the city council member was just charged for fraud because they found $120,000 in brown paper bag in his closet. That was my council member.
Yeah.
Was it your $120,000?
No.
Well,
and I did call him before I knew this. And I said, I'm a small, I live in the neighborhood. I'm trying to do some improvements. Can you help me? I never got a call back. Well, I'm too small potatoes for this guy.
And forgot to leave. I have a brown paper bag and I know what to put in it. Then you would have gotten that call back right away.
Oh, geez.
What's so crazy? If the city of LA was doing what you did, it would cost them $1.5 million, because with their HHH funds, it's on average $520,000 per unit that they're building. So I look at that, and it's just a sin. It's just so upsetting to me that this kind of stuff happens.
Well, that's the unfortunately, most things we see around affordable housing outside of this ADU thing, right, are about how do we use other people's money to build unaffordable housing. It's not about affordable housing at all, right? And it's like, who are we going to tax to build unaffordable housing and then give it away in a lottery to some lucky person? But then we're not going to give them any of the advantages. We're going to make them buy this house, but we're not going to give them any of the advantages of owning a house because we're going to deed restrict it so that they get no appreciation. It's just like, how could we screw this up more?
So you're saying I should move out of state? Is that what I should do?
I think you should do exactly what you're doing. And, I mean, here's my bigger picture thing. Like, I still live in California, right? So while we're on the California topic, right? Like, you look at all the best places in the world, right? So, Trump said, we don't want people from the shithole countries. We want people from, the Scandinavian countries. Well, guess what? They all have way higher taxes than we do here in California, right? Like, it kind of comes hand in hand. If you want to live in a great place, you get a bunch of this stuff with it, right? It's part of the trade-off. You can go live in armpit places in America and have less taxes and less, but California is pretty awesome. You can wake up in the morning and go skiing and be surfing in the afternoon and, stop by wine country in between. Like,
I totally agree.
I'm willing to put up with a lot. It feels like a lot right now, though.
Yes, it's overwhelming some days, but I've learned to just chill out about it. Some days I get riled up and I fire off an email or make a phone call, and then the next day I'm just like, hurry up.
Whatever.
And wait. It is what it is, and I'll get to it at some point. It would be nice to have things go faster, but it is what it is.
Well, let's say in the state of California, and it's not just California who's been focusing on these. I know Washington has been a big proponent of accessory dwelling units. I really like this as a solution.
Oregon.
Yeah, I mean, we're not alone, but here in California, by right, you as a landowner should be able to build one accessory dwelling unit. There are some exceptions. There is safety, public health. One of the things I was told early on is if you're on a lot and you look overhead and there's a power line, you just be careful. Don't assume. Don't spray and pray. It's the wrong approach with ADUs. I know you have an environmental story as well with liquefaction, yes?
Oh, yeah. Yep, got one of those. You want to hear that one too?
I do. I want to warn people because those are the kinds of things you buy and assume you're going to do it. And then a year later, you're like, oh my God, I wish I would have known.
Oh yeah. I've made all the mistakes, literally. And
let's start with what is liquefaction? Like, I'm going to keep bringing this, dumb this down.
I don't even know if I know how to explain this properly. It's where your house is sitting over some type of water table. So on the NHD report, there's actually a little thing that says, are you in liquefaction? Okay. I never paid attention to that. Who needs to know that for any reason? Well, this house I bought, it was a hoarding situation. So I don't make the seller do all those disclosures anyway. Well, I never knew it. I just plowed ahead and started my ADU design. Well, it was in liquefaction. So what does that mean? You basically have to dig
soils,
up.
right? So
yeah, it could be perceived as unstable soil. So what you have to do is stabilize the soil. You have to dig up the whole area. So even if your ADU is only taking up a portion of your backyard, you have to dig up the entire backyard all the way to the lot line, 5 feet down, and then put 1 foot of dirt back in at a time, compact it with this thing, get a third-party engineer to come over, poke a stick in it, say, yep, that's good, put another foot back, get them back the next day. It's just this process. And of course, there's nowhere to put all the dirt. You're digging 5 feet down. So you have to do one side and pile the dirt on the other side, compact that side, then dig up the other side, pile it on top. Then you have to get more dirt in because you've just compacted it. So you need more dirt. It's a process. It's a process.
I built a house back in 2012, and the foundation was triple the cost of what I thought it would be because it had to meet 100-year flood and 100-year earthquake simultaneously, right? And I'm like, okay, there's a bunch of stuff in my town that's been around more than 100 years, and there hasn't been a 100-year flood and a 100-year earthquake that happened at the same time, right? Like, we really seriously, like, this foundation's just incredible, right? Like, you think it would be for like a skyscraper or something, and it's, you know, a 2-story to one in sections or 1 story, and it's just like, what are we doing? We're making housing illegal by making it
yeah,
expensive.
and the new rules, they make you do all these things, and okay, well, it's fine, but it seems a bit excessive when you have like my home in Los Angeles is 1913 or something. Okay, it's still standing. It's lasted all this time, so they must have did something right back in the day. But yeah, lots of new rules for new builds.
Yeah.
If a real estate investor were, lessons learned, from a tactical perspective, I've shared and I've talked to manufacturers of ADUs, a lot minimum square footage that you've experienced work well. Is it a 10,000, like 5 to 10,000 range, 7,000? Do you have a preference of how much dirt you'd like to see?
No, I mean, 5,000 preferably on the smaller side, but it just all depends on the shape of the lot and sort of how you can, build on it. If it's got that access way from the back, it's much easier. Corner lots sometimes work pretty well, but you have the setbacks now on 2 sides for the ADU. The setbacks now, by the way, are 4 feet. So they used to be 5 feet. In some cities, they were 15 feet. I know I built one in 2018 that was a 15-foot setback from the rear. So you just have to sort of know the rules and figure out where you can put one that sort of makes sense. So yeah, 5,000 on the low end. I would say if you can, the bigger the lot, it's going to be easier, a little more flexibility.
Yeah, a fun little trick in PropertyRadar is to get the square footage and then start zooming in and look where the house is placed. And you can really create your own customized list. And if you have insights on, I had one ADU real estate investor, I actually think it was in Long Beach, where he knew where there was an alley, but also where it was very easy to connect to the sewer line. So it wasn't expensive. So he had sort of an inside track. So man, those hyper local insights, super cool. Now, an opportunity we have to talk about is upzoning. So if you're paying attention to, at the local level, upzoning opportunities that haven't even hit the realm of public record, let's talk about that. So if you have an R2, you can build a duplex and have 2 ADUs, correct?
Yes.
You've got
R2 just became an R4.
Correct.
Yes.
If you have an R4, you can build 4 ADUs, and guess what kind of financing you qualify for? Standard.
Residential 1 to 4.
And
you get residential financing, and you can build 8 units. You can have 8 units.
Yep.
Wow, it's a good one, Aaron. I didn't know that one.
So one of my favorite projects I heard about was a real estate investor who owned a triplex. And I thought this was really smart. It was on a rather large lot. He's like, yeah, what I've decided to do is build garages with ADUs on top that I will rent separately for whomever wanted to use them. I'm like, that's so smart. You're increasing the quality of the units themselves and then building ADUs. And he was just really happy. I'm like, yes, more of those. So there's just a lot of...
What becomes the difference between a unit and an ADU at that point? Like, we're going to call 4 units and we're going to call 4 ADUs. Is there a technical difference?
I don't know. That's what's weird. No,
I don't think there's any actual difference other than maybe the setbacks are a little more favorable for ADUs. And that's why I built, and there was only room for 1 additional housing structure on this R2 that I built last year, a couple of years ago. But so I called it an ADU because the setbacks were more favorable. So in terms of the actual space, there's no difference. But in terms of what you want to do, maybe to get it reappraised, that might be a little tricky. I did have some appraisal issues in the past. I don't know what those are like currently. I haven't done anything recently.
I'm still hearing that appraisers, they still don't know what to do because there's not enough comps. I think the closer you are to R2 properties, if you're on a single family with an ADU, you have more of a chance of them comparing it to a duplex. But yeah, they're creating an average square footage cost and carrying it over into the ADU, which is not great because it's the most expensive square footage crammed in a small space. So for flippers that are doing ADUs, I continue to see the problem, unfortunately.
Yeah, and going forward, I always want to have a couple different exit strategies, even if I'm flipping. What if I can't flip this due to it not appraising or due to the market dropping or whatever the case may be? I don't want to just be relying on flipping. I want to have another game plan just in case.
Look at you being all smart. Well, what are you excited about in 2021? What do you plan to work on this year?
Well, definitely I'm excited to get these three more ADUs. Well, one JADU, 2 ADUs built out. So I'll be working on that this year as soon as I get permits. I do want to continue my hoarding, marketing, which is, some days I don't do too much, but honestly, it's all word of mouth. So I just have to kind of stay in front of people. And nowadays I can't do my little wine and cheese open houses or, get-togethers. So it's all online. And that's why I've realized I need to be posting these pictures. I mean, I have pictures from a dozen years of all kinds of stuff I've stepped in and all, before and after. I might as well be showing that because I'm still in that business. So I'm still going to just do that and just be mindful that we might have an adjustment coming at some point. I mean, the market and prices last year went up 15%. Okay, who would have thought? You have a pandemic and prices go up 15%. I don't think they're going to do that this year. So I just want to be cautious of that. But yeah, I want
to be breaking the stock market right now.
Yeah, I guess I want to look at each deal creatively. I don't want to just run out for the sake of buying something. I want to look at each deal. How can this be a win-win for me and the seller? Could I do something with this to not just flip it, but maybe to keep it and build an ADU and have it as a rental? Or could I sell it to someone, or I don't know. I want to get creative with it. I think that's sort of my ideas for this year.
Hoarder houses are particularly just crazy. And, it's one of those cases where I don't think people realize how much value investors add in like taking care of problem properties and getting them back to the point where they can be financed. Because a lot of these houses that investors buy aren't financeable. They aren't sellable. Like, oh, an investor's flipping a house, but without that flip, nobody's buying it because you can't get financing.
You have to be really creative with those properties because you're dealing with a problem property, but you're also dealing with a person who has some issues. They can't just up and move. That's not realistic. You've really got to help them through that process and figure that process out with them. So you're dealing with a lot. So I think that's what I like about those is figuring out how to help that person and getting a deal for myself, make it a win-win.
What does hoarder marketing even look like? Are you rolling down the street being like, looks like you're a hoarder, call me?
No, all referral based. In fact, I've bought almost
mostly from agents.
From a portion comes from agents. A portion just comes through other business professionals that work in a similar industry. So maybe an assisted living placement person or a junk hauler type company. I get them from financial planners who know a person's financial situation where they have a property that needs to be sold. So different business professionals, it all comes through referral nowadays.
And you're marketing to them and not homeowners.
Correct.
Interesting. Okay.
A homeowner who has the hoarding disorder never wants to sell. They will never want to sell. They will need to sell at some point.
This isn't hoarding. These are collectibles. Every single.
Yes. You never call it junk. You never call it, these are their treasures.
Mm.
My best
You have to
one
be
was when
careful.
the hoarder passed away and the wife was left there going, "Oh my God, what do I do?"
Oh,
Mhm.
Yeah.
so stressful. Well, I'm going to make sure to post links to your website. What's the best way people can get in contact with you?
Probably just through email, or my phone number. You can post that if you want, Aaron.
I think folks should follow you on Facebook. Are you good with that? Would you
Yeah, I'm on
give us
Facebook.
how do they find you on Facebook?
Just under my name, Kristi Cirtwill, and also I'm on LinkedIn. So I post on both of those, and Instagram as well if you want a third option. So
You post a lot, pictures of ADUs, pictures of like furniture for ADUs. I mean, you have good content there that I think is helpful for anybody looking at this kind of space. And now you really are going to have good content.
well, thank you. Yeah, I mean, it's good to just keep it people's top of mind, and it's sort of not a direct marketing I do, but it's just indirect. I'm having fun with it. Why not show people what I'm doing? Then they remember me for a potential property.
Or partnering, because that's a people skill level that some investors just don't have.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
All right. Well, really, thank you so much for your time. It's been awesome.
Thank you both. I appreciate it. Thank you, Aaron and Sean.
Thank you for listening to the Data Driven Real Estate Podcast. You can find show notes and links to some of the resources mentioned in the show at datadrivenrealestate.com. Click that Join the Community, and you'll be forwarded to the Property Radar community where you can ask questions about the current show and even see upcoming guests and ask questions there. We'd love to engage with you in the community, so check it out. Please don't forget to like, favorite, subscribe, and share on your favorite platform where you're listening to the show. It helps us out a great deal. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week.